In a secluded corner of rural Thailand, where golden temple spires pierce the horizon and sacred chants drift through the air at dawn, a day began, one that would leave a permanent mark on the memory of all who were present. It wasn't merely another religious gathering. It was destined to become something greater, something that would challenge not only belief systems, but the very core of dignity, wisdom, and the resilience of truth itself. The town square had been transformed into an open-air interfaith forum. Colorful banners danced in the warm, heavy breeze, each boldly declaring the phrase, "Unity through understanding." Buddhist monks, Christian priests, Muslim scholars, and representatives from lesser-known faiths had all gathered beneath a shared sky. As the sun reached its zenith, casting a merciless glow upon the crowd, people from every background began to assemble: students, villagers, travelers, clerics, and even skeptics. At the center of the square stood a modest yet commanding stage, framed by rows of wooden benches, translation booths, and cameras waiting to capture what would unfold. At the heart of this spiritual convergence was a name that stirred both interest and unease: Toby, the aged Buddhist monk renowned across Southeast Asia for his piercing intellect and caustic rhetoric. Though often invited to speak at interfaith events, Toby was less a seeker of truth than a challenger of it. His reputation had been forged through years of fierce public debates, where he dismissed revelation as legend, scripture as psychological control, and prophets as eloquent storytellers cloaked in myth. That day, draped in the orange robes of his order and standing tall with a commanding stillness, Toby opened the forum with words that cut like a blade. His gaze swept across the audience like a falcon searching for weakness. With unwavering confidence, he questioned the legitimacy of divine revelation, particularly targeting Islam. "How," he asked with deliberate sharpness, "can a book written in a desert over 1,400 years ago claim eternal truth?" His voice resonated through the square. "Is it not just another tale passed down from man to man, shaped by fear, sustained by power?" A wave of discomfort rolled through the crowd. Some shifted uneasily. Others averted their eyes. A few clenched their fists. And then, just when it seemed the air would break under the pressure of silence, a hand rose, small, hesitant, yet certain. The forum's organizers turned. A boy, no older than 10, stood. He wore simple white clothes. His hair was neatly combed. His expression was calm and composed. His name was Huda, son of a local bookstore owner, admired in his community for his impeccable memory, deep comprehension of the Quran, and manners that commanded the respect of elders. There was a moment of hesitation. Could they really allow a child to speak at such a serious gathering? But before any decision could be made, Huda stepped forward on his own. His pace was deliberate. His eyes never wavered. His heart carried a faith too vast for his age. He reached the microphone, not with anger, not with fear, but with unwavering clarity. He didn't begin with a retort. Instead, he started to recite from the Quran. His young voice carried verses from Surah al-Baqarah, then Surah al-An'am, and later al-Ra'd. Each verse was delivered with smooth rhythm and exact pronunciation. But Huda didn't stop at recitation. He explained each verse, offering insight through the interpretations of classical scholars such as Imam al-Qurtubi and Ibn Kathir. The audience, previously restless, now fell into stunned silence. Their awe wasn't due to his youth, it was due to his depth. Toby, arms folded, leaned back in his seat. For the first time, his brows tensed. The smirk that often followed his challenges was gone. Still, Huda offered no insult. He praised Toby's passion for inquiry. Then, with the humility of a sage, he calmly addressed Toby's misconceptions. His voice never rose. He spoke not with defiance, but with purpose. Toby interrupted. "How can you believe in a book that declares itself perfect?" Huda answered, steady as ever. because that declaration is tested daily. The Quran is not protected by secrecy. It is protected by memory, preserved in the hearts of children, guarded by scholars, and verified by history. Can you name another book, sir, that has been memorized cover to cover by millions across centuries without a single alteration? Silence followed. A few clapped, not in mockery of Toby, but in admiration of the boy's poise and truth. Toby's face turned a shade darker, not from rage, but from something harder to bear: humiliation. The pillars of his lifelong skepticism now trembled before the insight of a child. And yet, Huda never lost composure. When he returned to his seat beside his mother, several monks and priests approached him. "Where did you study?" they asked. Huda smiled softly. "From the Quran, and from those who love it." But, with startling precision, he explained the Quran's compilation, how Caliph Uthman standardized its script while preserving authentic methods of recitation known as qira'at. He listed names: Nafi, Ibn Kathir, Abu Amr, not as mere memories, but as scholarly validations. Toby's eyes widened. These weren't just recited verses, they were scholarly defenses. He tried to redirect. What of the violence? The bloodshed? Does Islam not carry its own stains? But Huda, serene as ever, replied, "Every tradition has a history." Islam, too, emerged from conflict, yet within that chaos it preached limits, ethics, and justice. War was never waged for ambition, only in response to oppression. He quoted, "Allah does not forbid you from those who do not fight you because of your religion." Surah Al-Mumtahana, 68. Even the non-Muslim religious leaders looked deeply moved. What had begun as a debate was now something else entirely. A shift, a wave of undeniable clarity. One elderly priest leaned to another and whispered, "He speaks like a young Shafi'i." And Toby, he was breaking. The very tools he had used to challenge faith, logic, reason, scrutiny, were now turned back against him. And they came not from a scholar of equal age, but from a boy named Huda. What was meant to be a civil forum had evolved into something far more significant. Huda had not debated. He had witnessed. With every word he channeled truth not with pride, but with humility. The crowd sat silent, not because they were defeated, but because they were awed. Yet pride is a stubborn thing. After the forum ended, many lingered. Some exchanged quiet thoughts. Some looked at Huda as though they had seen something miraculous. Even religious leaders who rarely agreed found common ground in silence. But Toby stood near the stage, fists clenched beneath his robe. He wasn't ashamed. He was humiliated. That was no child, he thought. That was a trap, a setup. His pride whispered, "You weren't beaten. You were betrayed. By the crowd. By the gods." That night, as Muslims prepared for Eid al-Adha, joy filled the town. Streets bustled with celebration. Lanterns swung gently from balconies. Children carried balloons. The sound of takbir echoed through the air, a declaration of God's greatness. But in his temple, Toby sat alone. Peace eluded him. In his meditation chamber, shadows gathered. The verse Huda had recited haunted him. "Indeed, we have sent it down, and indeed we will preserve it." He stood abruptly, his breath ragged. His dignity, once a mountain, now crumbled. From a drawer, he pulled out an old copy of the Quran, one he had taken days ago from a mosque's free literature table. He had never truly read it. He had only marked what he deemed contradictions. Now he stared at it, not with skepticism, but with hatred. It had become, to him, not a scripture, but a weapon. "If this book shamed me," he growled, "then this book must be shamed." He wrapped it in a red cloth and tucked it beneath his robe. Then, under the still night sky, he whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, during their prayer, I will show them how weak their truth really is." Morning broke in golden silence. Birds flew between temple rooftops and mosque minarets. The Eid prayer crowd assembled, dressed in white, colors, joy, and reverence. Huda came quietly, as always, with his mother. He had no idea what awaited. As the imam stepped forward to begin, worshippers stood shoulder to shoulder. The takbir rang through the square. Then, from the edge of the crowd, Toby emerged. He walked deliberately, face expressionless, straight to the front. No one noticed him at first, and then he unwrapped the red cloth. Within it, the Quran. He struck a match. Flames caught, pages curled, smoke rose, gasps, screams, movement, but an elderly voice rang out, "Do not answer rage with rage. We are in prayer." The worshippers froze. Children cried. Mothers shielded their eyes. Huda watched, unmoving. The book he cherished now burned before him. Still, he did not shout. He whispered prayers. Toby stood watching, laughing softly, eyes gleaming with madness. He craved resistance. He received none, and that silence burned him more than fire ever could. He turned and walked away. Behind him, the ashes of the mushaf scattered into the wind. That afternoon, the sky darkened. The air grew thick. Trees bowed. Animals stirred. Children hushed. In his temple, Toby lit incense, but the smoke choked him. He coughed violently. The air turned cold. His body trembled. His reflection in the mirror was pale, hollow. He collapsed to the floor. Whispers circled, not from outside, but within. You burned the light. Now darkness will burn you. And so it began. Witnesses near the temple spoke of a strange white flash, not lightning, but a silent burst of blinding light. One vendor claimed a shadow had passed over the temple roof. Another insisted he smelled something burning, though no fire was seen. Inside, Toby was found in a corner, wrapped in his robes, trembling uncontrollably. His eyes stared wide open, lips cracked, skin tinged an eerie blue. No monks came near him. By morning, the temple bell remained silent. A young monk finally dared to open the temple doors. What he found chilled him. Toby was still alive, but barely. His skin appeared scorched, his body convulsed, and his mouth twitched silently. He stared blankly at the ceiling. Word spread quickly. Was this divine punishment? A response from heaven? The temple elders convened, urging calm. "Let us not answer hate with hate," they pleaded. But the unspoken truth lingered in everyone's minds. The boy had recited the Quran. The monk had burned it. And now the monk was being consumed, not by fire but by something inexplicable. The temple courtyard, once filled with chants and incense, had grown unnervingly still. The monks, once vibrant in orange robes, now moved quietly, glancing nervously at each other. In a secluded room, Toby lay twisted on the floor, barely responsive. His eyes, once sharp, blinked slowly, clouded by confusion, pain, and something darker. The young monk who had found him sat nearby, uncertain. Toby's condition defied both medicine and faith. There were no bruises, no wounds, yet his body trembled, as if screaming without sound. His skin looked frozen from within. The air around him felt unnaturally heavy. Each time the young monk tried to pray, something unseen seemed to stop him, as though warning him not to speak. Whispers filled the temple. "This isn't illness," one monk murmured. "It's retribution," said another. None dared raise their voice. It was as if the walls themselves were listening. Outside, the villagers remembered. The ashes of the Quran on Eid morning. The silence of the boy, Huda, who had watched but never retaliated. And now this. The monk who had mocked the sacred text was wasting away, locked in a room neither living nor dying. Many no longer believed in coincidence, only consequence. Some approached the mosque that night, not to convert, but to understand. They remembered Huda's calm, how he hadn't cried out for vengeance, just whispered his prayers. His stillness now echoed in their minds like light in a dark tunnel. Inside the temple, Toby battled something no medicine could touch. His dreams had turned to nightmares. No, visions. Blurred faces surrounded him. Flames flickered in his thoughts. And worst of all, he began to hear verses of the Quran. They echoed not around him but within him, repeating with frightening clarity. He couldn't understand them, but the melodies struck his soul like hammers. He couldn't turn them off. Indeed, we have sent down the reminder. He clawed at his ears, and indeed, we will be its guardian. He dug at the walls. The sound never ceased. The monks grew distant. Some refused to enter the room. A few left the temple entirely, shaken by the unseen weight that filled the halls. On the third night, a senior monk sent for a healer from the nearby city. The next morning, an old herbalist arrived. One glance at Toby, and he stepped back. "This is no fever," he whispered. Toby's forehead was ice cold, though the room was stifling. "His body," the healer said quietly, "is rejecting something unseen." They tried everything: herbal oils, rice water, remedies passed through generations, but nothing worked. Toby could barely drink. When they tried, he coughed up blood. Blisters appeared on his skin without flame. The scent of burning flesh filled the room, yet no fire had touched him. The monks began leaving food outside his door. Water was placed at the threshold in silence. No one said his name aloud. Inside, Toby whispered incoherently. Sometimes he repeated, "I didn't lose, I didn't lose." Other times he murmured, "Forgive me, forgive me." One night, with shaking hands, he scribbled something. The ink was smeared, the lines crooked. Only 2 words were clear. "Forgive me." No name, no request for medicine. Just an acknowledgement deeper than illness. When a monk found the note the next morning, he didn't touch it, as if it too bore the weight of judgment. Outside, the village watched in fearful silence. Some pitied him. Others were afraid. Children were told not to speak of the temple. Shopkeepers closed early. Even the animals moved cautiously. Huda remained quiet. When asked what he thought, he simply said, "That is between him and Allah." It wasn't vengeance. It was justice wrapped in mercy. Days passed. Toby's room darkened, not from the absence of light but from a growing sense. One monk claimed Toby had begun reciting verses in Arabic, but he had never studied the language. Another saw a glowing figure beside Toby's bed, faceless, motionless, present. The temple locked down. Visitors were turned away. The media told nothing. The story was buried, just like Toby would be, but not by fire, by truth. And truth wasn't finished with him yet. The sun had barely risen. The sky above the small Thai town looked heavy. Like it too had witnessed the unspeakable. Inside the temple, Toby's room no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a cage. It reeked of damp robes, failed incense, and something worse: regret. His body was twisted, skin cracked and swollen. Open sores oozed fluid. Each breath sounded like earth swallowing him. And still, he didn't die. Something held him between life and death, so he would feel what he had set in motion. No prayers echoed, no incense burned. Even the birds avoided the temple roof. Toby, barely conscious, tried to remember who he once was: a proud monk, a debater, a destroyer of myths. Now he was nothing. No followers, no pride, only pain. He tried to sip water. His fingers barely worked. The water tasted like ashes. Then came the shadows. They didn't walk. They floated like knowing smoke. They filled the corners, ignoring the lit lantern. Toby blinked, confused, and then he saw them. Faint outlines standing over him. They didn't touch. They watched. The air thickened. His chest tightened. He tried to scream, but his mouth stayed shut. The shadows whispered, "Not allowed inside. Inside your mind. You burned light. Now, darkness has come for you." He shut his eyes. The voices didn't stop. Then, silence. When he opened his eyes, the room was empty again, but his soaked, bloody robes told him the experience had been no dream. Across town, the mosque glowed with soft morning light. Huda sat on the steps, watching people gather for prayer. Someone approached him. "Do you think he's being punished?" the man asked. Huda paused, then said gently, "Punishment is for those with no return. Maybe this is mercy, if he realizes before it ends." The man nodded. No one said more. At the temple, a senior monk finally gathered the courage to enter Toby's room. He brought warm water and a cloth, but the moment he stepped inside, he froze. The air was freezing, the smell unbearable. He took 2 steps forward. Toby was curled up, childlike. His skin blackened in patches. His eyes rolled back. His body spasmed. Then, from Toby's lips came a growl, low, guttural, not human. The monk fled, slamming the door. His voice shook as he whispered, "There's something inside him. Something that doesn't belong." That night, villagers spoke of strange things. A shadow crawling across a wall with no source. Flickering lights near the temple. A small child cried to his mother, "Someone was calling me," from the temple, but it wasn't a person. Word spread. Fear followed. Toby's body had gone still, cold, stiff, barely alive. On the table, the same crumpled paper. "Forgive me." One young monk, braver than the rest, entered that night with nothing but his presence. He sat beside Toby and whispered, "If you can hear me, just blink." Toby's eye flickered. The monk smiled softly. Then, "You're still there. Here is a rephrased and rewritten version of your powerful narrative. The structure, tone, and spiritual depth have been preserved and enhanced for clarity, flow, and emotional impact. I've also maintained the length and reflective style, but made the language more consistent, fluid, and literary. Forgiveness must come from the one who was harmed," he said quietly, "not from us." With that, he rose and left, offering no further words. That night, the wind howled. The trees bowed low, their branches groaning as if under invisible weight. Thunder rolled across the sky, though not a drop of rain fell. The temple, once a sanctuary of stillness and discipline, was no longer a place of peace. Something beyond human understanding had entered its halls. Inside, Toby's body emitted the acrid scent of charred cloth. His skin peeled away in slow, blistered curls. His breath came shallow and rattling. His voice, once sharp and scornful, was gone, burned out, broken, and yet, within the silence, he heard the Quran again. The verses, once mocked, now echoed through him with a power he could not deny. Do they not reflect upon the Quran, or are there locks upon their hearts? He cried without tears. He had tried to destroy the book, yet now it was as if the book had written him into its story of justice. The temple, once proud in its solemn routines, had become a hushed place of dread. The monks walked slower. Their eyes stayed low, not in humility, but in fear. No chants rang out at dawn. No drums marked the sacred hours. Something had happened, something none of them dared to name. Behind a heavy wooden door, Toby remained, caught in a war between body and soul. His skin blistered and oozed. His lips darkened. His eyes rolled behind cracked lids. The once proud monk who had debated scholars, ridiculed sacred texts, now couldn't even whisper his own name. Yet he was alive, still feeling. The pain spoke through every nerve like a fire that refused to finish its work, burning but not consuming. No monk dared approach him now. Meals were left at the far edge of the room and retrieved untouched. It wasn't just disease they feared. It was something else, a presence, a judgment. One monk, young and still full of questions, dared to look in that evening. What he saw stole the air from his lungs. Toby's body shimmered, not with light, but with heat. Steam curled off the sheets. The air above him rippled like desert haze. The boy staggered back, unable to explain what he had seen. The others didn't ask. They had stopped asking questions. Outside, life tried to continue, but with caution. Children still played, markets still bustled, yet conversations were hushed, laughter careful. No one had forgotten what Toby had done. Many had seen it, the burning of the Quran. Few spoke of it, but all remembered. And now, seeing the man who had mocked the sacred slowly unravel without wound, without diagnosis, people began to wonder if something higher had intervened. At the mosque, Huda resumed his quiet life. He taught children. He helped his mother in the bookstore. But something had changed in his eyes. Not sorrow, not pride, clarity. People came not for rulings or sermons, but simply to listen. One shopkeeper whispered, "When that boy speaks, my heart softens." A woman who had never entered a mosque brought her daughter to learn Arabic. A Buddhist teacher visited, asking only, "Why didn't he retaliate?" Huda always answered the same. Truth needs no rage, only patience. Even non-Muslim families, shaken by Toby's condition, began reflecting. Not all converted, but respect bloomed where mockery once lived. Still not all were calm. Fear lingered. Rumors swirled. He brought something into the temple. There's a jinn inside him. This is what happens when you mock fire from heaven. None could explain it, and perhaps none dared to. Inside, Toby had stopped moving. His limbs stiffened. Fingers curled unnaturally. But he was not dead. His chest still rose, barely. His eyes opened in silent screams. Each time they closed, he saw fire. Not just flames, but symbols, verses, the faces of those he had insulted. Huda's voice echoed again and again. "Indeed, we have revealed the Quran, and surely we shall preserve it." He had mocked that verse. Now he was its proof. One night, with the last flickers of strength, Toby moved his arm. Beneath his pillow was a crumpled paper he had written days before. 2 words stared back at him. "Forgive me." It was all he had left. He looked up at the ceiling, the old beams, the faded paint, and then he felt it. Not a vision, not a sound, a presence. It stood over him, not touching, not seen, but undeniably there, watching, waiting. He tried to speak, to plead, but his throat was closed, his tongue stuck, his lungs too weak, so he closed his eyes. And then came the scream. Not from outside, not from his lips, from within, a piercing, ancient wail that ripped through him like a soul being torn open. The monks came running. They burst through the door. No fire, no attacker, just Toby, shaking violently, his eyes wide, his mouth agape in frozen horror, and around him, burn marks, on the floor, on the sheets, on the walls, but not a single spark had touched the room. Only him. The monks recoiled. One dropped his water bowl. Another whispered a prayer and fled. This time, the story spread fast. People gathered outside the temple. Not shouting, not praying, just standing, watching. Some in awe, some in sorrow, some in fear. That night, no one slept easily. What had begun with a child's calm recitation had become a storm of divine consequence. And it wasn't over. The sky remained overcast, not with storm clouds, but with something heavier, an invisible pressure. The air itself seemed unwilling to move. No one entered the temple. Inside, silence ruled. Toby's room bore the marks of something unnatural. The smell of scorched cloth lingered. The walls blackened. Yet the wood beneath him was whole. The sheets untouched. Only his body was ruined. His face frozen in a scream. Not of pain, of terror. No one could tell if he was alive, or trapped between this world and something else. A faint breath escaped his lips every few minutes, the only sign he was still tethered to life. One of his old students, now a monk himself, finally entered the room. With shaking hands, he picked up the crumpled note. 2 words. Forgive me. He folded it, placed it by the window, hoping perhaps the heavens might see. Huda never spoke of Toby, never claimed a miracle. He taught, he served. He recited the Quran with a voice calm and clear. A journalist came once, eager for a story. "You defeated him," the reporter insisted. "Isn't this divine justice?" Huda only replied, "Defeat isn't the goal. Reflection is. If even one heart turns before it's too late, that's enough." Toby's body finally gave in. Just before sunset, the temple bells rang out, 3 times. No one had touched them. The summer air turned cold. Inside, a final breath left Toby's lips, long, trembling. Then silence. He was gone. But the room was untouched. No flame had ever touched him. Only him. There was no funeral, no ceremony. His body was cremated quietly. The temple wanted no spectacle, only peace. Some monks left permanently, saying the energy in the temple had changed forever. One monk stayed behind, tending to Toby's old room. No incense, no chants, just silence and cleaning. The paper, "Forgive me," was sealed in a wooden box and buried beneath the Bodhi tree. Not to honor the man, but to mark a cry of regret. And Huda? He stayed the same. But the world around him changed. Children of other faiths came to his classes. Parents who once scoffed at religion now sat quietly in the back, not seeking sermons, seeking peace. One day, an elder monk from the temple entered the mosque, removed his shoes, and sat in the back. When Huda finished teaching, the elder raised his hand. "That boy," he said, "wasn't your student. But somehow, he learned through you." Huda smiled gently. "No one learns through me," he replied. "They learn through the Quran. I'm just holding the lantern." Months passed. The town healed, but it remembered. The interfaith forums, once hostile, became gentle. Debates softened into conversations. Arguments became questions. Toby's grave remained unmarked, but people knew where it lay. Some passed in silence. Some whispered prayers, not for him alone, but for themselves, so they may never again mock the light. Because fire, when lit by heaven, always knows exactly where to return.